The Civil War was the bloodiest single war in American history, with over 600,000 lives lost. While we were separate from our time and brought to the U.S. the American identity, the identity we were stopped thinking of ourselves as the citizens of our state, and instead as citizens of our country. In case you have lived under an educational rock and have heard of the conflict, I will summarize the conflict. In 1861, the seven states reformed the CSA, with four more joining it in a claim on Missouri and Kentucky later, to preserve their southern way of life, in fear that the newly elected Abraham Lincoln would destroy it. After the infamous Battle of Fort Sumter started due to unrecognized sovereignty of the CSA, war was on, and 4 years later, Southern forces would surrender, starting Reconstruction. So I ask the question, what if the North had recognized the South and let them go? Well, for one, I say the states that did join on a timeline with the threat of war in hand would legally join the Confederacy to preserve their strength, especially if they knew the Union would just let them go. 1861, and the government is formed, basing most of it on the U.S. as it does in our timeline. However, I assume that without the haste of the blooming war, an original constitution would be drafted, but it would most likely remain similar. In the U.S., Lincoln doesn't become the famous president that saved the Union, but rather the infamous Republican who lost the South, discrediting the Republican Party until its dissolution. Regarding Alaska, which was bought in 1867 our time, I believe that Russia would still sell it to the U.S. to compete with Britain in the Pacific. Mexico was invaded by France in late 1861. Seeing it as a weakened United States would stop them. However, in 1862 to 1863, the Confederate military supports revolutionaries in exchange for territory, and after a few years of fighting, the French are kicked out of America. Britain officially recognizes the CSA after this, as well as France's other enemies. A few major cities such as New Orleans, Montgomery, Richmond begin to industrialize to compete with northern companies. A major trading partner would most likely be Britain, with strengthening ties due to the recent Mexican War and possible resentment to the U.S. government. In the late 1880s to early 1890s, the Confederacy acts as a neutral representative during some peace treaties over Cuba with Spain and the U.S. with a small fleet of Confederate vessels. Among them is the CSS Missouri, which sinks suddenly, as well as the USS Maine. Both American governments come to the conclusion that the Spaniards sabotaged their vessels and ally themselves in an effort against the Spanish. After an incredibly short war, the US, CS, and Spain agreed to a treaty. The US would annex Guam and the Philippines, and the CS would annex Cuba and Puerto Rico, effectively ending the Spanish Empire. The Spanish-American War would help boost relations with the CS and US, especially as at least a generation passes through, with little memory of the secession. While relations would definitely be improved, I don't believe the CS would reunite with the US. Cultures would differ too greatly, and with enough economic success and stability, very few would want unification. The topic most people think of when they think of the CSA has come. Slavery. I'll simply say this. Slavery wouldn't last forever. Not even very long past the 19th century. There would very few Eurasian or American sovereign states with slavery by 1900. By then, there'd be enough abolitionists in the world to boycott stolen goods if they didn't abolish slavery. By now, I'd say the South would have sufficiently industrialized so that they could abolish slavery without an economic collapse. So, by the turn of the century, the states would have abolished their slavery with some forward on the 13th Amendment. 1914, in Archduke Franz Ferdinand is assassinated. After a couple years of debate, around 1916, public support in the CSA is strong, and it enters the war, providing ground and sea support. The war ends soon after in 1918 with the fall of the German, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman empires. In our timeline, the Great Depression hit hard in the South, and I would think it would as well here. Major productions begin by the beginning of World War II, with the major products of Mexico, Cuba, and the mainland South. Trade begins again between the Allied powers. World War II goes basically the same way as it did in our timeline, save maybe more men at Normandy and other European battles. Today, it's quite obvious neither power, the US nor the CS, would be powerful separate as they would together, but their alliance would undoubtedly make up for that. In our timeline, an example of such a relationship would be the US and Canada. By 2000, it would be far too late for any attempt at peaceful reunification, for their individual cultures would be vastly different. Thank you for listening to my awfully recorded voice in this attempt at speculation and to show how important the conflict was, for better or for worse. This is not a definite answer to the question, as for all we know, Maine secedes and conquers the entire North American continent. I will see you all next time I create this video, and thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if I got anything wrong. Goodbye.